Hi, and welcome to our show. My name is Curtis Brooks, and this is Getting Answers, the entrepreneur show that's about getting answers to the questions that you have as an entrepreneur or professional. Here on today, we are talking about millennials. And the title of our show is Yeah, but that's not really how the world works. Again, we're talking about millennials. And it is a huge subject as it relates to millennials. And the topic is, of course, trending. And as I like to say, trending for not the right reasons. And the subject is a huge subject. And I believe that it will be trending for a very, very long time. And in that capacity or that space, years to come, the topic of millennials. And I'm going to Before I get started, let me introduce myself again. My name is Curtis Brooks, and I am a transformational speaker. Me and my partners are working in the area of employee engagement, and that's what we specialize in. Again, as a transformational speaker, I've had the opportunity to encourage professional men and women of all ages, actually, professional men and women to create a winning mindset and through my workshops, through my transformational speaking and coaching sessions. In the event, that's what I do. And I would love to hear about what you do at some point throughout the show. But as it relates to millennials, our organization, again, my partners and we are working with organizations to help get them online, to get them on track as it relates to engaging their younger workforce and overall employee engagement. That's what we do. And so, again, we're talking about millennials today. Again, my name is Curtis Brooks, and this is Getting Answers, the entrepreneur show that's about getting answers to the questions that you have as an entrepreneur or professional. And as it relates to entrepreneurs and professionals, we're talking about millennials. What is the issue that we have with millennials? Why is there such a contrast? Do they not remind us of ourselves, being that they are, in fact, our offspring? Perhaps you are a business owner, a CEO, and you have a large workforce, or you have not so big of a workforce, and you're working with millennials. And you're trying to figure out, how do I engage my workforce? That, in fact, the workforce is different from my older workforce. My older workforce seems more loyal. They seem more understanding, and they seem not to be so flighty sometimes. And not to say that all millennials are flighty, and that's not the assumption. And perhaps it is for some, but that's not what I'm implying, is that millennials are flighty. But that is, I think, a huge assumption on a lot of people, because we can't put everyone in a basket and say, this is the way it is and this is the way they are. That does not work that way. And I think that time and time, that has proven a fault of our own, by trying to put everyone in the same bag or the basket and believe that they're all operating with the same mindset, or this is just who they are, this is how they are. And again, that has proven to be faulty for many, many reasons. But again, we're talking about millennials, and the title of our show on today is Yeah, but that's not really how the world works. And do millennials have something on us in regards to, do they know something that we don't know? Interesting. Or have we left something out as it relates to building a relationship with millennials? And throughout the show, we're going to answer two questions. Who is to blame? Because that's just human nature. We have a tendency to blame someone. It's millennials' fault. Millennials are saying, no, it's not our fault. And the adults are saying, well, it's not my fault, because I worked and I made things happen and you just didn't catch on. So we're going to get to the bottom of this, and we're going to hopefully make sense of this. And in the end, we're going to find out, maybe not so clear in who is to blame, but who will take responsibility for where we're at. We don't want to point fingers, but we want to put some dialogue out there on the table so we can begin to start a open communication and talk about some things. Again, not pointing the finger, but where did we go wrong as adults and my generation. And I have a millennial. So it's just, where did we go wrong? And myself included. So we're not singling anyone out, but to understand that there is a responsibility. There's a huge task at hand, and we need to take care of it. We need to be responsible for it. Someone needs to be responsible for it. And we cannot rely on necessarily the millennials to say, hey, I'm going to be responsible for it. And as adults, we have to take responsibility. I can remember when I was much younger, my mom would say to me, Curtis, there's 5 of us. And my mom would say to me, Curtis, being the oldest, at some point, you've got to take responsibility. And I'm saying that to us as adults. At some point, we have to take responsibility. And the blame game the truth about the blame game, it's never ending. It gets so out there to a point where we are just not really taking action. We're just tossing blame back and forth, back and forth. So with that being said, we're going to talk about who is to blame. In fact, is there someone to blame? We're going to discuss that. And we're going to talk about cultivating a workplace. And then we're going to talk about what now. So in order, I couldn't read my writing here, but in order, we're talking about who is to blame. Secondly, we'll be touching on what now. Now that we've found someone to blame, or now that we're going to take responsibility, what now? How can we mend the two, the millennial workforce and with the generations, the previous generation? So how do we mend those workforces, I should say, and so that we play together in our sandbox in a nice way, that we share our toys, if you will. So we're going to discuss that. And again, that's going to be what now. And then we're going to talk about finally cultivating a workplace. Ultimately, once we have discovered who is to blame or who is not to blame and who's going to take responsibility, and we've looked over the point, what now? Now we must cultivate a workplace. So how do we do that? So we're going to talk about that. So let's dive in. Who is to blame? My theory is it's the adults. And I know it's a far leap, and most of us may not want to hear that, who are the adults, and our offspring are the millennials. And I'm going to be honest, be frank with you, and as it relates to my situation. And I know one can say that, well, you can't say all adults are to blame. And obviously you can't, for many different reasons, because it's just not true. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we can't put all things or people in a basket and say, hey, this is how they are, and this is what it is. And that just doesn't work. And I think it's been proven time and time over and over that that method or that style of teaching or understanding does not work. So with that being said, I'm not saying that all adults are wrong. I'm just saying that from my perspective, and perhaps you can relate to this, is that from my perspective, it was that I was busy working, and it doesn't take away from the relationship. At least I didn't think so. Here I was working and trying to provide food on the table, or put food on the table and provide for my family, like most men do, or most women do in their households. We're taking care of our children in different capacities, or our families in different capacities. So my job was to obviously work, and in most cases it was working outside of the home to take care of my son, my family. And this is the dilemma I was in. I remember in a previous job, I asked a gentleman who was a business owner, CEO perhaps, or salesman or something of the sort. He was a businessman. And I asked him, I said, this may seem like a strange question, but as a man perhaps a father, a husband. I didn't know his necessary situation, but my question was to him is, how do you handle all of this in regards to first? And I then asked him if he had children. He said, yes, I have children. And I said, well, how do you handle all of this as a parent, as a leader of your household? How do you handle your situation as it relates to being there for your child? And he said to me, he goes, Curtis, you know what? Some days I just don't know. Some days I don't know. Some days I don't handle it all. Some days I'm the greatest father, and some days I don't feel like I'm the greatest. So I think that applies. I mean, perhaps it applies to you. I don't know, but it happens. And so we continue talking, and he says, Curtis, I just do the best that I can. I know that I have to work. My son enjoys the niceties that I provide. And from time to time, we go to baseball games. He said, actually, we go to lots of baseball games. And what we've been doing as we were talking about, we've been going to watch baseball teams play in each of their respective states. And that's a lot of baseball games. But he says, we don't obviously get to all the games, and which is understandable for many reasons, but that was his plan, to spend time with his son. And perhaps it works or it doesn't work. And my point in all of this is that I found myself really just taking that advice and just running with it, because I wanted to try implement that idea in my own life with my son. And it didn't work. And I found myself just going to great lengths to try to get home. And when things didn't work out, I'd call him up and say, hey, Curtis Jr., what's going on? You know, Dad wasn't able to make it home. And it sounded like it worked. And I think I had all of the greatest intentions of being there. But sometimes I feel like a failure as a father, because I wasn't there every single day like his mom was, because I worked outside of the home. She too worked outside the home, but I was doing more traveling. And in most cases, I was away from home for days at a time. And this is for many years. So I'm not here to get on a soapbox, but just to make a point in that, are we in fact responsible for the millennials or the situation being what it is? And we talk about the millennials being not focused, or at least not engaged at work or in the workplace, not engaged, and that their mindset is not necessarily focused. And the truth, a lot of them are very smart. A lot of millennials are very smart. They have degrees. And so this is not about bashing the millennials. This is about us as parents in regards to what can we do to bring the divide closer, so that we, again, do away with all of this division that's going on with us and the millennials. And I'm going to put out just a theory out there. Again, my personal theory is that it has been the parents who have caused this great divide. And that's my theory. And I'll give you a reason why. Relating back to what I said moments ago, or at least the story I was sharing with you, being a father, I traveled a lot. I could not be at home as often as I would have liked. I enjoyed my job. And the result was that there was a time when, this particular occasion, when me and my son were driving somewhere, or at least I was driving, and he sat in the front passenger seat, and connecting his seatbelt, and as we were getting started, and he says to me, I said, Curtis, what would you like for Christmas? And he says to me, well, Dad, I just want a PlayStation and some Xbox or one of those place game consoles or something of that sort. And it was so interesting because the way he said it was like he just wanted to just, that's all he wanted. And and there's a conversation that led up to it is because I was, I had again been away from home for a while and through traveling, and I hadn't seen my son for a while. And so when I finally seen him, here I was, hey Curtis, I'm so happy to see you. And I thought I would get more from him in regards to the excitement because I was so happy to see my son. And he was just kind of like, yeah, Dad, okay, almost this somber attitude. And I tried to say, oh, okay, well, maybe there's other things going on, and perhaps there were. I didn't know, but here I was moving on to the next conversation. Hey, Curtis, what do you want for Christmas? And he's talked about the game console, and his response was just really heartbreaking to me. But it is a response I'll probably never forget. And again, possibly by chance, this is what we're dealing with as parents, be it man or woman. This is the very thing that we may be dealing with. Whereas my son's response was, Dad, I just want a game console. That's all I want. Not that, Dad, I want you to come home. I want to spend more time with you. That wasn't his response. And I was nevertheless a little hurt by his response. And I guess really I didn't know what to expect. But after he said what he said to me, I was like, oh, wow. So that's all you want. And meaning for me, it meant, or at least I felt, he just wanted to just have his game console and just be in his own space and just do what he does. And I said all that to say is that I think, again, part of my theory still I'm talking about is that I think we as parents have done a huge disservice as it relates to our youth, the millennials now, who are up in age, who are in their 20s, early 30s, and now in a place or have been in a place where they're looking for jobs, in need of a job. And we as parents have not been there to give them the instruction that they need. And so in turn, we've paid for these huge, we've paid for these devices, be the PlayStation, Xbox, or the handheld PlayStation or game devices. We've paid for all of these different options and technology in way of the different game devices, iPhones and Google or whatever the case might be. And again, there's a gamut of different devices out there, but we've paid for these different things. And it's been on our dime that we have really disconnected with our children. And we are, in fact, responsible for causing the great divide. That is my theory. And I would love to hear from any of you out there that would say otherwise, or at least offer some suggestions and why I would want to think about this differently. And I'm going to even dig even deeper as relates to my theory. But again, we're talking about who is to blame. It doesn't mean that we're, as parents, that we're so horrible and we just need to fall off the face of the earth. That's not what I'm implying there. I'm implying that because now we can take responsibility, because as long as we are placing the blame on the millennials and saying, hey, to the millennials or even to our own children that, hey, you did this wrong. Well, it's not the fact that they did it wrong. It's the result of the equation that we put together, if you will. We've purchased the device. or whatever that device may be. It could be television. It could be the game console. It could be anything. But we've purchased a device. We left our offspring, the millennials, into their own space. And now the result of it is that they're not connected. And again, and I say connected, I use that term loosely. They're not connected in understanding the meaning of relationships and how powerful relationships are. And so while we as parents were out there making the connections, we lost connections. We lost the true connection, I should say, that meant everything, that was going to bring about other connections in so many other ways, that was going to be that rippling effect, if you will. So we lost connection with the very connection that truly mattered. And not to say that the other connections are or to minimize the other connections. It's not to say that that's what we should do, or that's what we should have done, or is to play those other connections, those business leads or opportunities, to play those connections down and say they didn't matter. That's not my point. My point is that it is through time management as CEOs and business owners that we learn how to juggle many different things. And perhaps our business life, perhaps our connections outside of home became too many, and we didn't have room to pick up the very connection that mattered. And that's my theory. Again, perhaps I'm wrong, but that's my theory. I don't believe that I'm wrong. And it's not to say that there's not another viewpoint or a different way of looking at this particular situation as it relates to our millennials. So obviously there's going to be different viewpoints, and that's okay. And I absolutely welcome them. Bring them on and let's talk about, let's discuss it so that we can come to a place where we are acknowledging that, hey, something needs to be done, and not just acknowledging it, but just recognizing that, hey, you know what? We need to start now. We need to, again, step out of the blame game and recognize that there is work to be done. And if there's work to be done, guess what? I'm going to be the one who takes responsibility for it. So with that being said, I'm going to do a plug here on my show. Again, you guys, for those CEOs and business owners out there, you can contact us on a website that is going to be www.iamcurtisbrooks.com, or you can contact me through my email address. That's going to be bookme@iamcurtisbrooks.com for more information about what we do, what me and my team can do for your organization as it relates to employee engagement. And that is across the board, whether you have an older workforce or whether you have a younger workforce. Hashtag millennials. Again, contact us and let us know what we can do and what your needs are as it relates to your workforce in the area of employee engagement. So again, we're talking about who is to blame, and this is Getting Answers. My name is Curtis Brooks, your transformational speaker and your authority in the area of employee engagement. Again, this is Getting Answers, the entrepreneur show that is about getting answers to the questions that you have as an entrepreneur or professional. We're talking about who is to blame. In fact, is there someone to blame? Or do we just pull up our pants, if you will, and tighten the belt and say, you know what? I'm going to take responsibility. I'm not sure who is to blame, but I know that there was an area that has been void of interaction, if you will, void of making that connection. It's been left untouched, if you will. And not completely, I can't dare say that, not completely, but it's been left untouched to the point where we're now saying, wow, this piece is important. So again, we're talking about who is to blame. We're not pointing the finger, but In fact, I guess I am pointing the finger. I want for us CEOs, I want for us business owners to stand up, take responsibility, take the lead on this. Because the more and more we point fingers back and forth, who's to blame, it doesn't mean that work is being done. It doesn't mean action is being taken. Yes, action in the sense of there's blame going back and forth, but it doesn't mean that action is being taken in the area of change. So again, who is to blame? So what now? What do we do once we have discovered who is to blame? And now that we've got that piece of it out the way, we as the CEOs, the business owners, and I know that there are lots of young CEOs and lots of young business owners, but let's do this in the adult-like fashion and take responsibility for the workforce that's really at some point that will be taking our place. Perhaps my son will be doing a talk show on the workforce that's coming after him. And I'm not sure what that workforce title would be, but perhaps he'll be doing interviews at some point. But there's someone who will take your seat eventually. And so rather than play the blame game, let's prepare them to take the seat in the appropriate like fashion. Let's give them the wisdom. Let's share the wisdom with them so that they will be prepared to take on the various things that will come their way. Be prepared to take on the challenges. And perhaps it's the thought of some business owners or CEOs that, well, they're a lost cause. I don't believe any of us are a lost cause. I don't believe any of us are a lost cause. And I think more so that we have to look at our own situation and look at our own plight to achieve to our own different levels of achievement and to just say, wow, look how far I've come. And not only looking how far that you've come, but look at the obstacles that you had to overcome to arrive at the place you're at right now. And so those are the things that we want to share with the millennials. And perhaps they're not going to sit still and listen to a 3-hour long conversation about how we used to walk in the dirt without shoes or something like that. And that may not be the way that you engage them in a conversation. That may not work for them. But we've got to do the homework and figure out how we can engage with our youth, because our youth, our offspring, is going to be the workforce for another CEO or business owner. So let's prepare them that perhaps they may be at the helm of your organization. Something to think about. So what now? We need to take a position. Be prepared to figure out, how can I engage my youth? How can I engage the millennials? And I say my youth, I say your son, my son, your daughter, I don't have a daughter, but the point of it is that we've got to figure out what engages them. And I'm going to, again, step out on a limb here and say that it's the relationship that's been missing that engages them. And now we've got to get back into that space which we have so given up in pursuit of our own dreams. And I say that not in a selfish manner, because perhaps you are fulfilling your dream and still you're away from home and not being able to be there for your family. Perhaps you aren't even close to your dream and you are still away from your family. So I use that term Dream not in the sense of a selfish reason, but perhaps you are in that space where you're happy with what you're doing and you're still having committed to, or have not committed to, being at home, spending time with your family, with your youth, and building a relationship. And I going to again step out on a limb. And I believe this in all my heart that it is the relationship that our millennials, that our own children are missing from us as parents. It's the relationship. And that's what they need. And perhaps it's too mushy for you. But the reality of it is that when we have purchased these devices, the game consoles, the PlayStations, the Xboxes, and things of that nature, when we have purchased these different devices, the phones and all of these different things, we have essentially left them to their own devices, if you will, paid and brought with our money. We funded this opportunity. And at one time, it was as long as we can keep them busy, keep them occupied, and we can go on to do what we need to do. And it was essentially like putting a pacifier in a child's mouth, in a baby's mouth. And if I could take their attention off them crying by putting a pacifier, and perhaps, the game in a sense is the pacifier, the wants that the child wanted, or in the case of my son, he wanted the game console. That was something that he believed was going to pacify him. And so I more than obliged him and just, hey, this is what you want, Curtis? Not in a spiteful way, absolutely not in that manner, but it was what he wanted. But at the same time, as much as it hurt me to hear him say that, I was also willing to pacify him and not really think about the bigger picture. Perhaps that's what we've been doing as parents. Perhaps you don't like the terminology, but the reality of it is that that's what we were doing as parents. We were pacifying them. Sure, we did what we thought was best. And I'm not saying that's what we did it intentionally, but we did what we thought was best. Me too. I did what I thought was best at the time. But the result is that it's coming back to bite us. It's coming back to bite us in our rear end, if you will. And more ways than one. Because now, a lot of us as adults, we're not in a space or a place where we can say that we trust them at the helm of an organization. We trust them in management. We trust them in leadership roles. But if we don't trust them, who do we trust? I'll give you the answer to that. We trust ourselves. And so, with that being said, we haven't placed any trust in them. And the only way that we can trust someone is to build a relationship with them. And so the relationship is what's missing. The relationship is been missing for many years. For multiple years, the relationship has been missing. And again, we've tried to pacify the relationship with devices, with Game Boys, with PlayStations, with handheld devices, with cell phones, with technology. And now guess what? They're running circles around us in the way of technology. Here as parents, and the buzzword is relationships. We talk about relationships all the time. We talk about not only the relationship with the product that we may be selling or with our colleagues, but the relationship that we talk about least is the relationship with our youth. It doesn't mean that we're going to be bringing our children to work, but it does mean that, guess what? We've got to come down to where they're at. We've got to be able to come down on a level and meet them where they're at and be able to share our wisdom and also get something from them. But now this is where we're at as adults. We're at a place right now that we don't trust them. Again, folks, it's simple. You can't trust anyone that you don't spend time with. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure this one out. You can't trust anyone that you don't spend time with. You can't trust anyone where you see them as the object and the subject to be studied. You can't trust anyone who you don't take time to get to know them. And perhaps we don't even know our own children. And I'm bringing this home for a reason, because as long as we can talk about the millennial workforce or the millennials, hashtag millennials, we can say the millennials. It's almost as if it's away from us. Oh, the millennials. But our children are the millennials. Our children are the workforce, the millennial workforce that we are so talking about. So it's important to bring it home. It's important to make the discussion relatable. So are you talking to your youth about your business, about creating opportunities for themselves, about some of the challenges that you've had as a father, perhaps, some of the challenges that you may have had as a mother? It doesn't matter. As parents, are we talking to our youth? And when I say millennials, we can obviously that's huge. That's a huge space. But again, let's make it personal. Are we talking to our youth? Are we developing a relationship with our youth? Because essentially, a lot of us have placed our youth in the system, if you will, and really expected the system to take care of them. And now it's not my child's fault. It's not my fault either. It's the system. The system has failed me. But folks, we have to remember, what part do we play in this system? It's a question that we need to address. It's a question we need to do more than address, but we need to actually answer it. At what part do we play in the system? The system isn't a system without us as people. Again, it doesn't take a rocket science to figure this one out. The system is comprised of a bunch of regulations and rules and do's and don'ts. But we are the people who uphold the do's and don'ts. We are the people who sign off on it. And we place our children within these systems and say, well, my child didn't know. I didn't know, but it's the system's fault. But in truth, guess what? It's the responsibility of us as parents. It's my responsibility. It's your responsibility. So what now? What do we do now? How do we get back into position? We invite ourselves into their space, if you will. Hey, son, hey, daughter, let's do this. Let's go out and hang out. How do you work that app? How do you do this? How do you do that? Different things. Let's make ourselves a part of their conversation. Let's be a part of what's going on in their life. Let's gather the momentum that we've lost. We've lost position, but let's gather the momentum. Because as I always like to say, it's not over till it's over. So while we are still alive, we're on this side of the ground, if you will, guess what? We have an opportunity to say, hey, what are you doing? Let's go hang out today. And I know it seems like it's a small thing, but doesn't everything start off small? Doesn't everything in life start off small? And when we can answer that question, we'll see that we are in the greatest place there is, because it in fact starts off small. So it starts off with a question. Hey, you want to go hang out? Hey, I thought we would do this today. I thought we'd go watch a basketball game. I thought we'd go fishing. These are the relationships that matter. So maybe to your surprise, you thought this was going to be a show about bashing millennials. No, quite the opposite. Quite the contrary. This is not a show to bash the adults or the generations before the millennials. That's not what this is about. This is about someone having the cognizant or the wherewithal to grab hold of the opportunity, and rather than just blame others and say, no, it's your fault. Well, okay, no, it's not neither one of ours fault. It's the system. And the system is so huge. Who are you blaming the system? So why not take responsibility for it? That's all I'm saying. Let's take responsibility for it. Let's take initiative. Let's be proactive rather than be reactive. And some of us have already reached that place where we're reactive rather than proactive. So let's decide to disengage from that method of thinking. And again, be proactive. Engage in this process of really learning all over again. Building a relationship with the relationships that really matter. And it's going to take time because we've been away for so long. It's going to take time to develop that relationship, to build the trust. Trust is a huge word, and most of us get that. And it's nothing to take lightly. And it is the same with our youth, our own children. Trust is huge with them as well. They may not say it in so many words, but we trust at times without even knowing that it's there. They're not trusting and not trusting. They're either in a place where they trust or a place where they don't trust. So let's, again, take the initiative to be proactive and think about, think about the great lengths that we have gone to make that business deal, the great lengths that we've gone to create opportunities for ourselves when we were not taking no for an answer. Let's apply that same thinking. Let's be mindful of the challenges that we've endured previously and use those same challenges where we did not take a no for our answer or to be the end of our situation. We fought back and said, you know what? That's not going to be my fate. And I trust and believe that it's not going to be your fate as it relates to your own youth, as it relates to the millennials, for the CEOs and business owners. It's not going to be our fate. So again, let's use that method or that analogy or the things that we've gone through where in our mind we say, you know what? I am not taking no for an answer. And let's apply that same information as it relates to building relationships with our youth. I'm not taking no for an answer. You are my son. I am your father. You are my mother. And I am your caretaker, whatever the case might be. And we know in our hearts that we've been trying to provide for our family. But again, sometimes the fact is that no matter how we may try to do something, the end result is this. And this is what we have to deal with. We have to deal with a disconnected, if you will. We have to deal with a disconnected workforce. Initially, a disconnected son or daughter. And eventually, they go out to the workplace or the workforce and they become a disconnected millennial workforce. So again, let's do our part and making sure that we are connected to our own youth, doing our part. Perhaps it's about creating some kind of mentor if you're a CEO or business owner, some kind of mentorship. Maybe that's an idea for you. So that you can bring the youth in. And even if it's not your own child, somehow, though we don't see it, that child or that millennial who may not be a part of your workforce, and I'm talking to you, Mr. CEO or business owner, perhaps that millennial is not a part of your workforce, but that millennial works for an organization which you rely on to complete your process. And if that millennial is working for that organization and they're not engaged, ultimately, guess what? You and I pay for it. Maybe not directly, but indirectly, we pay for it. Again, that millennial or that youth may not even be attached to our organization, but he or she is attached to an organization in which we rely on, which we need in a support force. They supply a product to us or a service to us. And that same millennial where we say, oh, that's their organization. No, it ends up affecting the whole pool. The entire system is affected by, again, who's to blame? It's not my fault. Oh, it's your fault. It's not my fault. It's your fault. So we've talked about thus far who is to blame. We've discovered, hey, we're not blaming anyone, but we're going to, again, pull up our pants and tighten the belt and make some adjustments and say, hey, I'll take responsibility. I'll make the executive decision for my organization and take responsibility and understand the fact that though millennials, even if they're not a part of your workforce, this is the awesome thing about this. Even if they're not a part of your workforce, we're all affected indirectly or directly, obviously, if they're part of your workforce. But again, if they're not a part of your workforce, you're going to be affected at some point. So let's not play the blame game. Let's begin to, our next point, let's begin to cultivate a workplace for the millennials. Again, not just for the millennials, but cultivate a workplace that's going to be cohesive, that's going to be conducive to productivity, conducive to increase productivity, increase employee engagement. That's ultimately what it is. And let's not be mistaken that the goal is for all of us, that we understand that through increased employee engagement, we have increased productivity. And through increased productivity, we have a stronger bottom line, if you will. So let's not be naive to the point, but understand that somehow, though we don't see the connection at times, it's connected indirectly. Because if you don't have a millennial workforce, be it big or small, your service more than likely, or the service that you're providing, or I should say the support that you are using within your organization to provide, that will help you provide services to your customers, to your clients, perhaps those organizations are affected by millennials in regards to the resulting effects where we as adults have not stepped up to take responsibility. And so though we are not directly affected by them, it's causing that rippling effect. In some way we are directly or indirectly affected by it. So again, creating a workplace, not just for millennials, but just creating a workplace that is cohesive to building relationships, that is cohesive or conducive to a environment of growth. And this is interesting. I thought it was very interesting because if we can understand, and there are a lot of people who eat healthy, and I'm not off the subject, I'm using this to make a point, but there are a lot of people who like to eat healthy and make sure that a lot of the right things go into their body. And we understand that it starts with the product, not just with the intention, but it starts with the product that we are consuming. And if we can understand that if we are eating meat, and that it's important to understand that the animal is raised in a environment that is conducive to a healthy environment. And I've heard studies or read different studies where they play music and things of that nature to relax the animal, and things of that, things that are conducive to a healthy environment. And if we can understand that in regards to what goes in our bodies, that it's healthy, that it's made of the right product, if we can understand that, how much more is it for us to understand that with people? That if we are responsible in creating a workplace that is conducive to a engaged atmosphere, engaged environment, I should say, the outcome is going to be, or the result is going to be, something more than we've imagined. Not so elusive, obviously, because the goal is to increase employee engagement. The goal is to eventually increase productivity. And we know the rest of the story. So with that being said, if we can understand that if we place the right things in our body, we eat the right things, the animal is raised in a proper environment, fed the right things, that those things ultimately go into our bodies, and we produce with greater stamina, and just different things. We're productive in our own lives. So if we can understand that as people, as it relates to what goes into our body, how much more with this same mindset or same understanding work in the workplace. So again, let's be mindful. Let's create that same workplace environment that where once more that if we understand what we eat as part of being healthy and that our bodies will perform at its best ability. We don't get as tired as often. We're able to think better. We're able to be more alert. Why not take that same thinking into the workplace? And CEOs, business owners, ultimately, we are in charge of changing the workplace environment. And if your workplace environment is hostile, look at those who are in charge. If your workplace environment is not as progressive, look at those who are in charge. So ultimately, leaders, it's on our shoulders. Again, I think a very strong point is that if we can understand that the healthy things go into our body, it produces greater performance in our bodies. We're able to think better, feel better about ourselves. Why not take that same thinking into the workplace and attach that mindset to different policies, to the system that we've created in our own workplace environment? Let's build that for them. Let's do it for the future of our own business, the future of our brand, the longevity of our businesses. And in doing so, we reconnect with our youth, the millennials, and we continue to build upon the history, upon the work that was already done, upon the very establishment of the stones which we've built our own organizations on. So again, if we believe all these great things, these wonderful things, let's apply them to our workplace environment and bring out the best in people. Bring out the best in them. We'll see the best in them when we connect to people. When we connect to our workplace environment through building relationships. The product is probably the best it's going to get. But in order for the product to get better and to become great, to become awesome, you must connect with the people. Because in fact, the people are the product. The people are the producers of the product. And if what goes in is not good, it's not healthy, you best believe what's going to come out is not healthy. Wow, great show. Again, my name is Curtis Brooks, and I want to thank you guys for tuning into an awesome show. We're talking about millennials. Excuse me. The title of the show is, yeah, but that's not really how the world works. #millennials. Once more, my name is Curtis Brooks, and I am your host and transformational speaker and your authority as it relates to employee engagement. So contact us for more information about what we do and how we do it, our process, our system that we have in place as it relates to getting your organization back on track and getting your employees engaged for increased employee engagement and more productivity. So once more, contact us on our website, www.imcurtisbrooks.com, or you can email me at, I will put my email address here in here. Email me at bookme at IamCurtisBrooks. I'm one of those persons who it's not very, do not, I don't do very well at multitasking, but nevertheless, we get the job done. So again, you can contact us at our website. That website is www.iamcurtisbrooks. And my email address is going to be book me at iamcurtisbrooks.com for more information about our services and what we can do for your organization. Again, we'd love to hear from you. You can also contact us on Twitter at iamcurtisbrooks on Twitter, and also on Facebook. That's going to be I Am Curtis Brooks on Facebook and also on LinkedIn. So let's connect there on any of these platforms. We'd love to hear more of your ideas and suggestions as it relates to employee engagement. On LinkedIn is also I Am Curtis Brooks, almost forgot. So again, with that being said, folks, let's make the right connections. Let's make those connections that are worthwhile. Let's make those connections that are needed. And that is through relationships. So once more, I am Curtis Brooks and your host of Getting Answers, the entrepreneur show that's about getting answers to the questions that you have as an entrepreneur or professional. Thanks for tuning in.